Please note that the views expressed on this program are those of the individuals who speak them, and not necessarily those of Portsmouth Community Radio, its Board of Trustees, members, volunteers, or underwriters. Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. Good evening and welcome once again to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. I am your host, Willie Hassell, your gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable. And she is the always lovely. She is the mystical. She is the mysterious. She is Lynn Nickerson.
And how are you, Mr. Willie Hassell?
I am fine. And how are you tonight?
Just fine, thank you.
Well, that's good. That's good. Did you do anything exciting this week? Anything?
Well, you mean other than shoveling?
Yeah, I was going to say besides shoveling snow. Yeah. I know you did your share of that.
I've been reading a very interesting book, though, I can tell you that.
You have?
Yes, I have. We'll get to discuss it tonight, too.
Yeah, you know what? I bet it's the book that was written by tonight's guest.
You know, you're onto something.
You know, as Garfield would have said, you have an amazing grasp of the obvious, right?
Thank you.
No, not you, me.
Oh. I thought you were giving me a backhanded compliment. You just took it away.
That's giving it to myself. So before I get myself in any more trouble, should I go ahead and introduce tonight's guest?
Please do.
Why don't I do that? This week on Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, Sarah Soderlund is a psychic and paranormal investigator. She has studied parapsychology at the University of Edinburgh. She holds a master's degree in forensic psychology and is currently pursuing her doctorate degree. Sarah is also a licensed hypnotherapist and holistic practitioner. In her new book, Haunted by the Abyss, Sarah talks about some of her life's experiences growing up in the world of the paranormal and her study and research into the world of ghosts, demons, and the psychology of the paranormal. So why don't we now welcome to Spirit Radio, Sarah Soderlund. Good evening, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Good evening.
Nice to have you on. How's the weather there where you're at?
You know, we just got done having about 12 inches of snow, and now it's raining.
Oh, my gosh. Oh. And where's that, Minneapolis?
In Minneapolis, you got it.
Wow. Well, they're not known for their good weather anyway. So it wasn't a surprise, was it?
No. I don't necessarily look forward to anything out of the ordinary other than a lot of snow and a lot of cold, but that's okay. We like it that way.
Well, has it been a milder winter there for you?
Yeah, actually, the whole El Nino thing, we are not excluded from that, where normally we would have 3 or 4 feet on the ground. We've only got about 4 inches.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah.
Right. It's a lot. It's a lot like how it was for me growing up in Missouri, where you know it's white for one day and then it's muddy the next, and you kind of go back and forth. That's how it's been, which I don't like that. I like it to be kind of tranquil and fluffy and, dependably snowy.
Well, just be thankful you don't have to put up with 7-foot snow drifts. We had that last year. It was awful.
That's right.
But moving away from the weather, I wanted to talk about your book, too. It's really wonderful. We both enjoyed it. And, I'm in awe of the fact that you've melded your personal life seamlessly with your professional career by getting into both forensic psychology and parapsychological research. So that's really commendable that you've managed to do that with your life. You also mentioned that you've investigated in more than 11 countries, 38 states, and 3 continents. So were you doing all that traveling when you were over at the University of Edinburgh?
No, the majority of my traveling was actually between my sophomore year of high school and my senior year of getting my bachelor's degree.
Wow.
Where it's kind of, your late teens, early 20s, and I was a little bit of a rebellious young adult.
No.
And
There's nothing wrong with that.
But anytime that, somebody would loosely say, like, oh, well, we're over here in Maine, and anytime you're this way, and I'd be like, okay, I'm coming your way. And so I took a lot of invitations and study abroads. I remember walking down the hallways of school, and there'd be, a trip going to Mexico or a trip going somewhere, and I thought, you know what, I'm going. So I did a lot of fundraisers and sold a lot of candy bars and worked my butt off as a young pizza slinger. And, got to travel around quite a bit.
Well, you got to investigate some old castles, some battlegrounds, and some places in London, too.
Right. There's just all sorts of locations, and I think for me, I'm really passionate about the history of a location.
Yeah, me too.
I love going somewhere and standing there, like outside the London Tower, and thinking, just closing your eyes and feeling the breeze and thinking, man, you're like,
how many people lost their heads there?
Right. How many people were swinging, and just the horses and the battles and just all and you're in the same space.
Right.
So it's that to me is pretty magical.
It's
so,
pretty powerful.
It is very powerful, and there's a lot of paranormal stuff going on, but there's just a lot of spiritual stuff going on.
Yeah.
Just to kind of be present. But yeah.
For our listeners, Sarah, could you kind of define the difference between forensic and clinical psychology? Because you are a forensic psychologist, right?
Right.
Okay.
The biggest difference, I think, is clinical psychology is usually what comes to mind when people think of psychologist. It's someone who is working in diagnosing and working in the treatment of kind of the normal range of psychological ailments, whether it be like depression or bipolar. The clinical realm is kind of what you experience when you're going into the medical model and you're wanting to get treatment, whereas forensic, the majority of that is in a court or judicial setting. It's a prison demographic. It's for me, my dissertation is on psychopathy, so I really enjoy working with violent offenders and doing, criminality and criminal behavior and the why, the motivations of, is somebody mentally competent? Is somebody mentally able to go to trial and be held accountable for their actions and that sort of thing?
So do you wind
up... It's a little different.
Do you draw up profiles? Do you do the profiling?
Well, profile is a dirty word.
I didn't realize I swore over the airwaves.
Yes. A lot of it is, trying to learn about the mind of a killer or the mind of someone who is a violent person and understanding their intentions and their motivations. And a lot of it is profiling. A lot of it is, what are they struggling with, or what are they struggling from, or, what are their influences and that sort of thing. And that to me is just fascinating. So that's kind of where I went.
Well, when I was getting ready to go to college, I had decided on psychology as a major as well, and I found out that was not for me, but my impetus was trying to understand everybody else's behavior that I was baffled about. So what was your drive in taking psychology?
Very similar to your own, actually. For me, it was a lot of the paranormal occurrences that I had growing up. I had experienced things and seen phenomenon that made me kind of an outcast to my peers. And I wanted to know, like, man, am I crazy? Or, what makes me different? It was more of kind of a self journey. And I think a lot of psychologists go in it for that. We want to learn about the self. And that's kind of how it started. And I really got into forensics when I worked my first job as a CNA at the Department of Mental Health in Missouri, and they put me on the forensics unit because that's the unit no one else wanted to work on.
Really? That sounds very interesting, though. It does to me.
Well, to me, gosh, I just loved it. I loved it, and I also kind of had a soft spot because, I kind of grew an attachment to some of my patients, and it was sad that their family would never come and visit them, and that, like my dad, he's kind of a Bible Belt Baptist Christian who's like, man, if it's a pedophile, he ought to just be under the guillotine, and he's very black and white, and I think a lot of society does that to really violent criminals, and so I kind of was interested in, the treatment and
well, it certainly seems like you helped a lot of people because you were willing to try and understand them where others wouldn't.
Right.
Who did you have to talk to when you were a child? Now, I know your mother was psychic. Was she the only one you could share things with? There was also your sister, but she was 8 years older than you.
Right. I'm so impressed you guys are on top of this.
We read your book.
Yeah. My mom was a really good guiding force in my life for anything spiritual, but also her mother, my maternal grandmother as well, very, very gifted with intuition. And it was not treated as a psychic gift, but more as a
something you talk
gift,
about in whispers.
Yeah, right. It was more like, this is just it, and you don't question it, and it's like a mother's intuition with their children. You just kind of, learn to listen to yourself. And so my sister, my mom, my grandmother, and,
So you could talk to your grandmother about that, Sarah? Your grandmother? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you still feel like an outcast with your peers, but that's nice that you had family to talk to. We've got so many different stories we want to cover tonight, so I'm going to try and move on to Spooky Street. That place is really interesting. Now, was it just particularly that house, or did it seem to be the whole area that was kind of off?
It's I would say the whole area, and it's been kind of interesting because the house has since been demolition, and a horse ranch has been built on top of it. And I have so often wanted to go back and see and ask the owners, how the horses act and if they have any experiences. But it was really the area, and probably about a 10-mile stretch of really strange occurrences.
Really weird.
Really, yeah.
What about the body bags? Did you ever find out if it was definitely Spooky Street that they showed up on?
It was definitely Spooky Street that they had showed up on. It was definitely the street up from where we lived. But I probably spent 2 years as I was doing a lot of the book process, trying to figure out more details on that particular killer and who they thought it was. And if it was just limited to that area where I grew up, because I grew up in Parkville, and there wasn't a lot of that kind of activity in the small town. But it was definitely something that still haunts my sister, because she was the one who had come up on these bags, with her friends as they were out biking. And to later know that they were filled with flesh was kind of
just morbid.
Kind of scary.
Very,
that it
very.
happened right up the way.
And kids out riding their bicycle, they're at risk. It's very scary.
Right. And it's a street that we would go on anytime we were going to the grocery store. It was kind of the quick cut through town.
When the body bags showed up, though, that was kind of like part of the aftermath. Wasn't there something wrong with the house to begin with before that showed up?
The actual house on what I refer to on Spooky Street in my book, it started with my parents kind of always talking about the house. And it was one of those where it was kind of, I never really knew if they were embellishing or not, because of the way that they would act or the way that they would talk about it. And my dad actually had the experience that made me realize that there was a lot of truth to the fearfulness around this home, and it had been exorcised a handful of times.
Really?
By a family friend of ours who was a real estate agent, who was the listing agent for the property and was really struggling to keep the home off of the market.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like every time that there was either a family staying there or a family doing the move-in process, that they would quickly move out. And I never, I was too young to hear the details of those stories, but I do remember having that man exorcise the homes, and my parents talking about whether or not an exorcist was going to happen through, or an exorcism was going to happen through our church, because the Baptist church didn't necessarily do that on houses.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like this topic of discussion, because the man had come to my mom to ask her opinion on who he would find and who in the area would do an exorcism on a property versus a person. And shortly after the exorcism on the home, it was about a year later that the man died. He was only about 39 years old and died of a heart attack, which was kind of a surprise to everybody. So it was just, again, one of those strange coincidences where it's like, man, everybody involved with that house, just strange things happened.
Had you ever looked into the history subsequent to all of this moving away, Sarah? Did you ever find out what might have been at the bottom of it?
Well, I do know that the area, and I'm always kind of on the tip of my tongue, for those people listening, I know up where you guys are at, people probably don't care so much where it's at, but in the Missouri area, there's the Missouri Valley, and it's in the Tiffany Springs area. And that area is really well known for being Native American burial grounds, but also for kind of the Trail of Tears movement through the area for the rehoming and rehousing of some of the natives. And so a lot of the stories in and around the area are kind of associated with that, but I don't know for sure. It's really hard to say, because it's also, Kansas City is also kind of smack middle of the border wars with Quantrell's raids and a lot of really violent Civil War activity. And so there's just a lot of,
factors contributing
early
to
American
the unrest.
gory history.
Yeah. Oh. Well, it was a very interesting account anyway.
I'm glad you liked it.
Oh, yeah, very interesting. Well, the next thing, the haunted duplex. Sarah's got a bunch of these stories of haunted lands and haunted Sarah and demons, and a couple of them that are just really interesting stories. And I don't like to focus on the negative, but I've got to tell you, they were really quite shocking. The haunted duplex and the problem that you had with the entity that impersonated your grandfather, I found that really quite shocking. Would you like to talk about that for a second?
Sure, yeah. That was probably the most difficult chapter for me to write.
I bet it was. You had to relive it again.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where oftentimes if I'm at like a conference or if I'm talking with people about some of my experiences, they always want to bring up the D word and ask me if I've ever experienced demonic activity. And I struggle with that because I'm kind of a fence rider, which I don't like to be. But part of me, believes that there's a great balance in the spiritual realm. And so for me to believe in a higher power, there has to be kind of the equal and opposite force. But then with that, I think, man, the more that you give attention to something, the more you're reliving it. Kind of like
if you don't, we don't have to talk about that, Sarah.
No.
You sure?
No. Right, yeah, no.
Okay.
I wrote it. It was kind of cathartic because I thought, okay. I'm getting it out of me. But no, that chapter with the haunted duplex. Yeah, let's talk about it. What specifically?
Well, what really got me is when you had to sit in the bathroom all day long to collect your senses. Is that what actually happened? You were there for several hours?
Right. Yeah. It was from about 11 o'clock in the morning to about 7 o'clock at night when my roommate got home from work.
Wow. Did you sleep?
I wouldn't.
Oh, were you conscious the whole time?
I was in the space between the floor and the bathroom.
Yeah.
Bathtub, kind of right there on the floor, and I just sat there, and it was kind of, looking back on it, I think psychologically it was a lot of grieving. It was a lot of grieving from the experience because I thought
you had been tricked.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if there is a demonic force out there in the universe, I thought, what a evil thing to do.
Yeah.
Because now if I ever do see the image of my grandfather, if my prayers are answered that he ever comes and connects with me, I won't have the initial happiness. Instead, I'm going to have
it'll be different energy,
response.
Sarah, I think. It'll be different energy. I think you'll recognize him for who he is.
I hope so, because that's my biggest fear. Is I've always kind of thought, like, what an evil thing to do is to change a hope.
Yep, that's
and so that's what really affected me the most. And I sat there until my roommate got home because I wasn't prepared to go out in the hallway and see it or see anything.
It had vitiated a sacred memory for you.
Yeah, it was very visceral, and it was very very emotional. I think it's probably one of the few experiences that I've had where there is an actual visual, audio, like full-on physical experience that was scary.
Was it translucent?
No.
It was opaque?
Right. It looked, no, it wasn't opaque at all. It looked just like a person standing at the end of my hallway, only there was no shadow.
How bizarre.
Which is kind of, as I recall it and as I remember seeing it and experiencing it, it was walking down a hallway towards the bathroom, and you walk past the kitchen and you walk past a staircase and you kind of walk past a lot of illuminated rooms with sunlight, and the light never changed on this figure as it walked towards me. Which
another dimension.
I remember being like, this isn't right. There were just all those little things that unconsciously you start to become aware of where it doesn't feel right.
Now he, or it rather, did not, it stopped at the bathroom doorway, right?
It did. It stopped at where the carpet met the linoleum.
It's almost like that was protected space. I think you were being protected. That was my feeling when I read it.
I hope so, because, I've had a lot of feedback about that particular moment and what happened after that. And it was kind of like right before you're in a car accident or right before something horrific happens and you close your eyes and you put your head into your knees and you cover your ears and you just zone out for a second. And then you look up and it's not there. And you hear something and you see something, and then all of a sudden it's not there. But the emotional response kind of lingers. And it just stopped, which was only about 1.5 feet away from me. The bathroom was pretty small, but it was something about that space in the carpet, something that it was. It was like I had some guardian force or something that stopped it, and thank goodness.
Well, that was some experience. Were you going to say something, Willie? Oh, no, okay. I wanted to ask you, too, about the Phantom Hitchhiker, but it's along the same lines. Do you feel like talking about that from the TB hospital? I'd say Phantom Hitchhiker. I meant it was an entity that,
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing because Christine had said to you, don't bring anything back with you, and you did, and she recognized it right away.
Right. I had 2 women rooming with me at that trip that are dear friends of mine, and neither one of them claimed to be psychic or anything like that, but they're kind of fellow paranormal investigators, and they're very funny, sarcastic, just lighthearted women. And as I left that night to go investigating, Christine had said, now don't bring anything back with you now, just kind of giggling, and we all kind of laughed it off. But it was so strange. After investigating that night and after kind of having my experience, coming back, and it was really late. It was like 3:30 in the morning, so I didn't want to wake the 2 women in the hotel room. So that I kind of slowly closed the door and let it latch. And I came walking into the main space there, like all hotel rooms are. And she sat right up and looked at me and said, "Man, I told you not to bring anything back."
Ooh.
And it was a completely different energy. It was a completely different way that she said it. And I just looked at her and I was like, "You got to be kidding me. Come on now." And she just kind of rolled over in bed and And then after that, a lot of really strange things started happening in and around my life after that occurrence. And I knew just from having random people come up to me and say things that something was off.
And you noticed, some people noticed the darkness even in your photos, you said, that they look at a photo of you online.
Right. I came home from that weekend. It was like a Sunday, and Monday morning I had messages from people that I hadn't spoken with in years. This was the time of like MySpace and Zanga and the very initial part of social media. And people calling me and emailing me and saying, "Hey, I had a dream about you, and is everything okay? I had just really strange things were happening. Are you okay?" And being like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then I'd get off the phone and I'd go sit down to do homework, and I'd have an email saying, "Hey, who's that person in the profile picture that you just changed? You had a profile picture up this morning of somebody was standing behind you. Who was that? Was that from this weekend? Did you get a spirit on your picture?" And I hadn't changed my picture.
Oh my gosh!
Like and it was just the weirdest things, and it was just random things like that where, after you have 9 or 10 people a day,
that's quite
strange things.
My gosh!
So it was giving me the willies.
What were some of the strange things that happened to you during this period of time? Like from the time that you decided to do something about getting some sort of clearing, how long a period of time was it from that night to the time you decided to do something about it? Several months?
It was about 9 months.
Really? That long?
It was about 9 months. And in that 9-month time period, the house I was selling went into a short sale. My car that I was driving blew up on the highway. The transmission or a part of the radiator caught fire on the way from Columbia to Jefferson City. And I was actually driving to a paranormal investigation to help a family whose dogs became cannibals and ate each other, and they were having really strange things happening in their home.
Strange.
I had a really bad relationship kind of fall through. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian disease. I got really depressed. I ended up moving back home with my family, and my grandmother passed away. My sister had a really bad bout of depression and became really suicidal, and we were dealing with that. And like that 9 months was...
It's like being cursed.
It was right. It was one of the worst, most trying times I'd had. And I was working a metaphysical conference and was walking around and kind of wondering if I should go get a psychic reading or something because I was just really depressed. And I had a woman come up to me, and she just approached me and said, "You really need to have a cleansing. You really need to have a cord cutting. I saw you from across the way. Would you like a free service?"
Wow.
And I thought, well, man, anything helps. So, yeah.
You were so lucky, Sarah, that you were not burnt in that car. Do you realize that?
Right. Well, and it was really weird, too, because I was driving. It was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm barreling down the highway with my music playing, and smoke starts coming out of my vents. And I was still driving. I didn't pull my car over. I called my dad and was like, "Dad, I've got smoke coming out of my vents. What is this?"
Just get out of there.
Pull over right now and get out of the car. And I pulled over, and I tried to pop my hood, but I couldn't get my hand underneath the hood. It was too hot. So I just sat there and waited for the firemen, and they came and had the fire extinguished underneath because it started catching fire. And
wow. Well, Sarah, I'll tell you what, we're at the bottom of the hour right now. We're going to have to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to continue with what this woman had to say regarding the cleansing and what she did exactly. So we are now talking to Sarah Soderlund. She's the author of Haunted by the Abyss, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, so please don't go away. Supernatural Magazine, the UK's newest paranormal magazine, provides support to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. It is the magazine's goal to bring every aspect of supernatural news and research from around the world under one roof to create a universal platform for all those interested in the supernatural. More information is available at supernaturalmagazine.com. You are listening to Spirit Radio, the paranormal experience on WSCA 106.1 FM, and we'll be right back after this short break.
You are listening to WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, West End. And from the community calendar, on Wednesday, February 10th, the Lamont Gallery will be holding Radical Gratitude from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at their gallery studios. Rather than buying a Valentine card, this is your chance to stop by and make a card for someone you are grateful to have in your life. This is a free event open to all ages, all supplies, and Valentine's sweets will be provided. The Lamont Gallery is located at the Phillips Exeter Academy, 1110 Lane, Exeter, New Hampshire. For further information, call them at 603-777-3461 or visit their website at exeter.edu. And Lynn, you have some upcoming guests?
Let me see. Our guest list starts with February 13th. We're welcoming back Richard Estep, and he's a transplant from the UK, and he's presently living in Colorado. And he's returning to discuss his new release, The World's Most Haunted Hospitals, True Life Paranormal Encounters in Asylums, Hospitals, and Institutions. February 20th, we're welcoming back Steve Parsons through the magic of fiber optics and from the UK, and he's regarded as one of the foremost investigators of the paranormal. He holds classes on ghosts and has organized the principles of his teachings in a book titled Ghostology, which is his latest release. February 27th, our friend Richard Southall, who is author of Haunted Route 66, had been booked for this date, but he's facing a schedule constraint, so for the moment, the date is open, but we'll be rescheduling Rich in the future. March 5th, we're welcoming back Preston Dennett, and he's been on several times now, and he's an investor extraordinaire with MUFON, and he'll be joining us to preview his latest release titled Not From Here. March 12th, it was Sam Queen and Jamie Davis, who co-wrote Haunted Asylums, Prisons, and Sanatoriums. And Sam was on the show last November, 2015. And during that interview, we didn't have enough time to cover all the material. So Jamie's coming back. Sam is coming back. Jamie can't join us this time. And he's going to apprise us of the remaining tales of some of these insanely haunted locations. And that about wraps up our guest list for the time being.
Okay, so now let's go back to the phone for tonight's guest, Sarah Soderlund, author of Haunted by the Abyss.
Yes.
I knew that. Welcome back, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Hi. So you went to this, like a psychic fair or something, or paranormal conference, and this lady wanted to do a cleansing. So what did she say to you, and what did she do?
Man, she just walked right up to me, and she just said, she said, I can tell you really need a cleansing. I saw you from across the way. Would you mind a free service?
Wow.
And I said, sure. And I walked behind her a few walks. We walked a few feet over to her little booth area, and just right there in the middle of all the bustle, she said, okay, I just want you to stand still for me and close your eyes and take a few deep breaths, and I'm going to do a shamanistic cord cutting, and that's what I specialize in, and you're going to hear me making a noise and using this tool here. And she had a little spearhead-looking tool that she had in her hand, and she said, this is a tool I use to help cut some of these cords, and we're going to let go of some negative energy. So just take a few deep breaths and let me know if you have any questions. And she did this thing around my body. She kind of went around almost as if she was hacking away at, like, cords or hacking away at something.
Like vines
just
or
a
something.
few inches from my body. And
I'm trying to picture this tool. What
was it, like a spearhead with a handle on it, like a shaft?
It looked like a 5 or 6 inch long arrowhead, made of like an aluminum or a metal, with just a short little nub of a handle, like a wooden handle, just long enough for her to hold on to it. And it looked like a spade on plank arms or something. Yeah.
Okay.
And she just held it in her hand, and just a few inches from my body, she went around and she kept doing that over and over. And it took her about 15 or 16 minutes. And at the time, I kind of was thinking, this lady's crazy. But I'm going to go ahead and just let her do her thing, because she just was really into it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, I thought, you know, I do feel a little better, and I thanked her, and I said, thank you so much, and I'll take your card. And strangely enough, you know how the spiritual world works, man.
Things started improving.
Turning around.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're so fortunate that you bumped into her.
Right, that she just saw me and came up, and that's kind of how spiritually how I operate. I tend to just trust the universe and take opportunities as they come, and saying yes when you can. And she wanted to help, and so she did. I let her, and it worked.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad you're here to tell about it.
Well, you know, I would never have gone there looking for a shamanistic
No,
setting,
I don't think you were aware of it.
Right, no, I had never even heard of that. But, and I certainly wouldn't have thought, when I think of a shaman, I wouldn't have thought of this beautiful 20-some-year-old, like 80-pound soaking wet woman with a spear in her hand, but my life turned around after that, and so I'm just so thankful.
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay, how about the little cemetery at the top of the hill? Willie and I both love that story, too. That was pretty darn creepy, what happened to you and your sister.
It was, yeah.
Right. This is my sister's favorite chapter, and I remember when I gifted her my very first copy of the book, she, and within days, got back to me and was like, oh, my God, I can't believe you wrote about that. And she was so excited. So for anyone listening that hasn't read this, there's this cemetery, and if you go to like shadowlands.com, or you Google haunted places near you or something, there's always this little legend of a cemetery up by the airport, a cemetery up in, you follow a road till you can't go anymore, kind of a thing. and there wasn't like exact details, and this was before there were GPS. You wrote it down on a sticky note or a piece of paper plate, and you just got in your car and went. And so that's what we did. We set out that night, we got ourselves some beef jerky and cheese, and said, let's go find this place. And after about an hour and a half of searching, we get on this gravel road, and we go about 7 miles. We're going to where the road's getting narrower and smaller, and you're thinking, man, we may not be able to turn around if we keep going too much farther. And then we get to an opening, and we realize we're right near the airport. You can see a gate in the distance saying, like, no trespassing, and you can see the planes flying overhead. And then it's just this little patch, like, I don't know, maybe 200 yards by 100 yards. Not very big at all. Out in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no mailboxes, no nothing. Just a dirt road and a little patch of land.
Old family cemetery, probably.
Right, with these tombstones. And we were really excited. Like, we got that adrenaline rush, like, we have found it, like pirates with treasure. But we crept up and with the car, and we said, okay, how are we going to do this, and we're all excited. And I pull up closer and closer, and we get to where we find kind of a spot to park, and where normally my sister and I, we're pretty brave. We bust out of the car and get out. There was that intuition that just, we didn't want to get out of the car. We both sat there like bumps on a log, looking at each other, waiting for the other one to say something about who was going to go first, which is just not like us.
And didn't the car kind of stall?
Yeah, I had turned it off, and we bickered back and forth of what we were going to do, and she said, how about we back up, and how about we get a better spot? How about we shine the headlights on the space? And I couldn't get my car to start.
Oh.
And my car was just of a model that the doors were electric, which is a new thing. And I couldn't get my door to unlock or lock. I couldn't get it to do anything. And her and I were both like, oh, man, this is not a good sign. This is not a good sign. This is not a good sign. And we sat there and dealt with my car and dealt with our intuition and dealt with bickering back and forth and arguing what was going to happen. And we never got out to investigate the space. And we still haven't ever gone back.
Oh, that's amazing. Not even in the daylight, huh?
Which is kind of weird. What's that?
Not even in the daylight.
Not even in the daylight. I've taken a few other people up to it in the daylight and had them get out and look around, but I don't. There's something about it.
Almost ominous.
It is. It's very ominous, and it feels very alive, even though it's like very outdated and overgrown, and it is very old. And the tombstones, there are no names on them.
You saw a shadow man that night, and you heard drumming that night.
Oh,
I mean, that was a pretty psychically live night.
Right.
Active.
That night on the way there, we were going over this back road, and I told my sister, I said, you know that my very first boyfriend I ever had, I said, he died up, and he lived right up this hill. He died in a car accident. He got hit by a drunk driver. I said, man, I remember Dad dropping me off at his house for his birthday party not too long ago. And I was pointing up in the distance to her.
Mm-hmm. And
I said, yeah, that house right up there. And as we crested over the hill, I slammed on my brakes because I thought we were going to hit a deer. Because that's what I saw. I saw movement out of the corner of the lights of our car.
Mm-hmm.
And I slammed on the brakes, and this shadow man, and I hesitate to even use the word man, but it was masculine.
Yeah.
The broad shoulders and the way that it looked and the way that it moved, it had that very, very aggressive kind of a feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Walked right across the headlights, and my sister reached over and grabbed my thigh and clenched my leg, and we both just sat there, and it moved across the road.
And you're not seeing physical features per se. I mean, not a face and eyes, and just kind of a dark shadow man.
A complete void.
That's weird.
And didn't it stop in the middle of the road and stop and look at you for a minute, and then moved on? Yeah.
Just for a moment. Just long enough to turn, which is weird because when you don't see that there are features or a neck or anything, but you see the head shape move in a way that just for that split moment it jerked its head at you and then kept walking.
You just know it's turning to look at you. Yeah.
Right. And my sister goes, go, 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 go. And
no kidding.
And as we're flying down the road, she's, what was that thing? What was that thing? Did you see that? You saw that, right? You saw that. And I said, I have no idea what that was. But after it happened, we were like, oh, my gosh, man, something's going to happen tonight. Something's going to happen tonight. I can't believe we just saw that. And, it was exciting, but it was scary. And she was laughing because she's like, man, I'm sorry I told you to go, but I thought it was going to come creeping around the car and look at me or something. I didn't know what to think. I've never seen anything like that. And it was tall and slender and void.
Why do you suppose people see those? Because there is that specific category of a shadow person.
Right.
And there always seems to be a negative connotation.
Since you're asking me.
Yeah, I am.
My opinion of them is I do believe that they're like an interdimensional being.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that they're a different kind of matter or mass that just doesn't react to light, doesn't reflect or refract. I think that they're almost like a rip in time, but you feel their presence and you know that they're there and they know that you're there, and there's this strange interaction that I think it's immediately intimidating and negative because there's a sense of a hierarchy.
Yeah.
That you don't know what it is, but they know more than you do. That they know what they're doing, where they're at, who they are, and you have no idea.
It's almost like it's usually a warning, because you were sort of, I mean, the night was psychic all night long.
Right.
Paranormal.
Right. We had a lot of occurrences that night, and even a few that I didn't write about in the book.
Really? There was more?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Right. And yeah, when you look at it and you think about it that way, you almost kind of wonder if it is a warning. And in that way, it wouldn't be a negative thing. It would be like, like a Mothman or something, like this omen of something happening, which, isn't a bad thing to be warned. But at the time, man, it was really creepy.
Well, had you gone into the cemetery, if you had the compunction to get out of the car and go into the cemetery, I think you might have regretted it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think so too. And I think that whether it would have been something on a physical level, like tripping and busting your ankle, or somebody thinking you were trespassing and you're a terrorist or something, or more of a spiritual realm where you're bringing something back with you and things start happening. I don't know, but
well, that was quite an experience.
It was, and I can see now why that there are these vague stories about it all over the internet that don't really give a lot of details, because I imagine that that's probably how other people experience it as well.
Now, you had also mentioned seeing sort of this is my terms, but the tombstones shimmering. Have you seen that again with anything else? Have you seen that effect again?
The
kind of like
in
heat
Joplin,
off the highway.
Missouri, they've got the Joplin lights, which I think is similar to maybe what we experienced that night, but the skeptical believer in me wants to say, like, man, maybe it was condensation on the tombstones and it was the planes going overhead. It's hard to say what it was, but it was this, and so I think back on it, and light anomalies, I don't experience a lot of them on a regular basis, with the exception of real-time ball lighting, like the real-time orbs. I get a lot of those around my firstborn son.
Oh, really?
But, yeah, he attracts things like nobody's business.
And what sign is he? Your son?
He's a Gemini. He's on the solstice, baby. So he's on the cusp of a Gemini and a Cancer.
Oh, I'll be darned.
And I've got videos of catching them in the real time, and you see them stream around him. And I used to never think that really happened, because I'd watched YouTube videos of the orbs in real time, and I was like, no way.
Yeah.
But they really do happen like that around him. And only him,
my.
not my second son. He doesn't have any weird occurrences yet. But.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, Sarah, how about your night terrors? You sort of intimated a connection between those and maybe some abduction experiences with UFOs. Do you think that's probably a pretty possible idea?
I do, and that's like a whole nother radio show, but I do.
Really?
It really is. I think that a lot of experiencees or experiencers, and even your future guest here coming up next month, Mr. Dennett, might expand on this too. He and I have discussed that a lot of people who experienced alien abductions, they also have night terrors.
Really?
And whether or not it's some repression that maybe they're experiencing, or the actual experience of the abduction, there's not a whole lot of physical evidence at all on that, but just instead this correlation that people have those. And it's kind of freaky that I had them as a child, and my firstborn, again, he had night terrors for the first 2 years of his life really badly.
Really?
And he talks about seeing, he calls it Monster Spaceman, that he talks about.
Really?
And he does this, it's just really bizarre. And so when I had worked with a few psychologists and paranormal researchers on alien abduction and alien abduction regression, night terrors was one of those really common symptoms. And it freaked me out, because I remember thinking, like, oh man, I had those as a kid. Does that mean?
Well, Sarah, you had mentioned that you had ovarian cancer, and that also you have the blood running down your stomach, which is sort of a telltale sign of a laparoscopy. Lacops, the laparoscope procedure. And I can't. Thank you very much. That's what that sounded like to me. So, are you free of the ovarian cancer now?
I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when I was 17, which is very, very young, but it was prevalent in the women in my family.
Oh.
And so I detected it very early. I had the cysts removed, and then after that, all of my pap smears were normal. So I just did a very raw diet and kind of a juice detox and kind of kept up with my blood work. And a few years later, they diagnosed me with polycystic ovarian disease and that I wouldn't have children and that I was having all of these fertility issues, which is another common symptom of abductees or experiencers. And I would wake up from these. I would wake up in the night, or I would wake up for no reason at all. Usually at the same time, and I know it's not always at 3, but for me it's 4:27. I always wake up at 4:27.
Wow.
And that's kind of that time that I always see over and over. That's kind of weird about numerology and kind of seeing the same numbers. But in my book, I had mentioned one of the most recent experiences of waking up and having this feeling that something was off, and then you sit up to kind of shake things off, and I felt something drip on my leg, and I looked down, and I've got blood running out of my belly button, and I ran over to the mirror and looked, and there was no hole or no cut, and I didn't remember doing anything, but I put my finger in there because I had an Emmy, and there was blood everywhere. And so I ran and jumped in the shower, and by the time I was done with the shower, it wasn't bleeding anymore. And I asked the nurse when I got to work that day to check me out, and she couldn't find anything.
So do you think there's a connection? Do you think they helped you?
I do.
They must have, since you're experiencing an improvement. I mean, if you were supposed to be infertile and now you aren't, it sounds like some good came out of it.
Magically...
Yeah.
Well, I was on metformin for a long time, and then, which is a fertility drug, lo and behold, and then had my 2 children back to back, and it was kind of one of those medical anomalies that I wasn't supposed to, and I did, and I couldn't explain it, and
you have to take a close look at that. But you know what, Sarah? We're darn near the end of the show here. We're running out of time.
We only got about 2 minutes left.
Yes, I wanted to get into some of your past lives, too, but I just didn't hurry you along enough. That's too many questions. Well, perhaps we can have you come back and we can discuss some more of this.
Absolutely. I would love that.
Wonderful. I'd also like to know about your sister's lion people past life, too. I found that fascinating because I have a personal connection to that myself.
Ooh.
All right.
Yeah. You got to have me back on.
Yes, definitely.
We would love to have you back on. You want to tell people where they can get your book and websites or anything like that?
Absolutely. Well, if you're an Amazon kind of person, you got a Kindle, you want to download something, you can go to Amazon and just search Haunted by the Abyss. Or you can go to Barnes & Noble if you're still a tactile person and get the book there. Or you can always go to Llewellyn Publishing, and you can also go to sarahsoderlund.com and order a signed copy from me to you. I've got a whole gaggle of them here that I send off to people all the time, and so I always love hearing from people. But just sarahsoderlund.com, and you can also find me on, Facebook, Twitter, all those social networking stalking sites. I like to interact with people, and you can catch me there. And I think as close as I'll get to you guys is this June. I'll be in Iowa.
That's not real close, but would
not
love
real
to,
close, but closer than Minnesota. But I'll be in the haunted city of Alton, Illinois, there with Troy Taylor doing a big paranormal conference. So
perfect.
Very good.
Well, you've been a delight. Thank you so much. We love the book, and we look forward to having you back on, Sarah.
Absolutely, guys. It's been my honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, that takes care of Spirit Radio, the paranormal experience, for one more week.
Yes. And Craig Mosher's coming up.
With the Graveyard Shift.
That's right. And thank you, everyone, for listening. You have a good evening.